Yeah, and I think that the sometimes a lot of people are surprised, especially if they hear me speak now, that the book is it's very vulnerable, right? It's very raw. It's like, here are my good girl mistakes. And I think that what you often see with business books by men is that they act like they know everything. They've got all their shit together and they're like, let me tell you from the voice of God that this is how it's done.
Yeah. Welcome back to Fearless Narrative, a show that's all about the incredible stories of women who are changing the game, breaking the rules, and pushing through the boundaries to face their fears head on because they are fearless entrepreneurs and creatives, and we love to see it. I am your host, Courtlyn Jones, and on our show, we go into a deep dive into captivating storytelling and engaging conversations with these incredible women as they share how they are pursuing their passions and shattering glass ceilings along the way. We love that so much. It's so inspiring and so empowering to share these stories with you. And hopefully it will empower you to embrace your own fearless path. Our show is all about feeling the fear and doing it anyway, as well as women supporting women. We love that. We need more of that always. So before we get started, don't forget to hit the button to subscribe to our show. We also would love a nice 5-star review at the end. Without further ado, let's go into a new episode right now. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome back to Fearless Narratives. I am your host, Courtlyn Jones, and today we have the honor of hosting Lisa Carmen Wang, a true powerhouse with an incredible journey. Lisa is a former 4-time national champion and a USA Hall of Fame gymnast, and she's made a transformative shift from the world of Wall Street to becoming a serial entrepreneur, investor, executive coach, and global speaker. She's a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, part of the Fast Company executive board, and a proud Yale University graduate. Lisa is the founder of the Bad Bitch Empire and the author of the Bad Bitch Business Bible, a groundbreaking guide designed to liberate women from the constraints of good girl brainwashing and empower them to seize the money, power, and respect they rightfully deserve. Her mission is to inspire women to build unwavering self-worth and wealth, working together to invest in the next generation of billion-dollar, impact-driven, female-led businesses. Lisa, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. So your journey from being a champion in gymnastics to Wall Street to now an entrepreneur is extraordinary. Can you share the moments that changed the direction of your life?
Yeah, there have been so many moments. I mean, when I started gymnastics when I was 9 years old, it was a decade-long career, and I retired when I was 19. And up to that point, I had become 4-time U.S. national champion, world championship team 3 times, Olympic alternate for 2008. And after gymnastics, I really was ready for the next challenge, and I embarked in college at Yale University, and I wanted to find my next passion. So I've always really been driven by passion, and I wanted to find an intellectual passion, and I ended up studying literature. And somehow my career found myself in a very male-dominated industry in finance, Wall Street, then Silicon Valley in tech. But there have been so many times where it was really just a process of betting on myself. I quit my nice, cushy corporate finance job, became an entrepreneur, took the leap into entrepreneurship, didn't even have an entrepreneurship network, didn't know how to incorporate my business, didn't have any investor networks. But there were a lot of lessons learned during the way, and I'm sure we'll get to all of those. But it's been a long journey to go from gymnast to corporate hedge fund analyst on Wall Street to Silicon Valley, helping women raise over $50 million in funding, and then becoming an investor myself, and then launching the Bad Bitch Empire, and then most recently releasing my book, my first book with HarperCollins called The Bad Bitch Business Bible.
Yes, I actually have that book with me right now. And actually, I read it twice already, but I read it again last week for the interview. And first of all, I love the title of it. I think it just really just pulls you in instantly. But what inspired you to write it, and what's the key message you're hoping your audience and your readers will take away from it?
Well, it's the 10 commandments to breaking free of good girl brainwashing and taking charge of your body, boundaries, and bank account. And good girl brainwashing is all of the societal and media messages that train women to be silent, play small, and be subordinate to the status quo. It trains us to not bet on ourselves, to not bet on our dreams, to not take risks, and creates good girl habits like toxic perfectionism, people pleasing. And really, at the end of the day, being a bad bitch, as I define it, is taking charge of your body, your boundaries, your bank account, unapologetically going after your big dreams and creating that unapologetic wealth for yourself, to be a financially independent, financially free baddie, and knowing what it is that you want and knowing that you deserve the unapologetic worth and wealth that you were born for.
I love that. And I also love, I think for me, the best part of your book that I felt was most aligned with what I'm going through now was number 5 and number 6, which is the bad bitch carries her crew. That one I really loved. And I feel like it's been coming up for me a lot because I have a friend recently who was telling me that her friend, I guess, decided to change her entire friend group and chose to get all new friends to match where she wants to go with her career and with her life. And she kind of like had her old friends kind of tossed out to make space for these new friends to, I guess, propel her to her new level of life. And that felt really not mean, but it felt like, I kind of want to do that because I kind of want to have this new alignment of a crew around me that supports me and is inspiring. And then your next commandment, which is number 6, which is a bad bitch calls out bullshit. That one was also very triggering to me, which I thought was really great. But it was like there are so many moments where you pointing out how men respond and react to us in this space, and that was also really powerful. And I know that you've talked about your own experiences in your book, but can you tell us more about good girl brainwashing and how it holds us back from reaching our full potential?
Well, I think that there's a difference between like tossing out and just naturally evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, again, yeah, anywhere where you feel triggered is actually an opportunity for growth. Mm-hmm. So, because a lot of times those triggers are revealing a uncomfortable truth that a certain part of you perhaps doesn't want to face or isn't ready to face. And I also say this about when you're triggered by other women. So sometimes a lot of women will become competitive, or we know the ugly feeling of jealousy and envy. And I have found that as you grow in your journey being a bad bitch who knows her worth, unapologetically knows her superpowers, that competitiveness really does just fall away, because you realize that there's only one you, and you bring very unique superpowers to the table, and there is no one else who can have the exact magical concoction that you have. There's plenty of clients to go around. There's plenty of audience to go around, right? One woman's awesome podcast doesn't diminish another woman's awesome podcast, and so on. But also if jealousy is also a trigger, for example, like if you see another woman who you're like jealous of and you're like, why is she getting all this attention? Why is she get to build her brand? I'm doing something, just as powerful. That's actually an opportunity for you to say, oh, what she's actually showing me is what's possible. Mm-hmm. And so I always recommend when women feel that twinge of envy, that's an opportunity to potentially even write to that woman and say, hey, I so admire what you've done with your career and with your brand. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm also inspired. I hope to do what you do one day, and just letting you know that. And who knows, right? That could be the beginning of a new friendship, of leveling up and being around the very type of woman that you want to be around.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. One of your mission is to empower women to build unapologetic wealth and worth. Can you share some practical steps or advice for those of us who aspire to do just that?
Sure. Yeah. So unapologetic worth is really about unapologetic self-love, self-respect, self-belief. So many of us are so busy thinking about what we want to do and questioning ourselves and trying to make everything perfect that we never launch. And this is especially for ambitious women, perfectionists, high achievers, creatives, anybody who wants to put something of themselves into this world. And we have this nasty habit of always like questioning whether we are allowed to put it out there, or whether it's good enough, or whether people are going to receive it well or positively. And that is really also just an indication that there's some level deep within you that feels like you're unworthy of, whether that's the money, the respect, the applause, or whatever it is that you want. There's a part of you that feels unworthy. So the deep unworthiness that women have often been brainwashed with is that feeling of we are not deserving of great things. We are not deserving of being unapologetically wealthy. And this is why I have worth and wealth intertwined, because oftentimes it's not about the fact that women don't have wealth. It's about the fact that there's a deep energetic connection between wealth and worth, right? If you feel unworthy of being wealthy, the wealth never comes, no matter how many programs you buy or how many people you try to imitate, right? You're like, he's making $10 million. Let me just take his exact playbook. But for some reason, it doesn't work when you do it. And so this is why I say a lot of times, like, ideas are not really the things that matter. It's the execution, it's the self-belief, it's the people who take action and build momentum that will ultimately make a difference.
It's amazing because in your book, you also talk about how you were once shy, and it seems you've overcome that so much, because I'm seeing you just like thriving right now, and you're just really like outgoing and you're speaking really well. Whereas me, I'm over here like stuttering and panicking talking to you. But I'm just curious to know, like, how did you? Well, I read in your book, but how did you learn to step into this bad bitch persona? Because it's really important for us all to do that, and I'm trying to learn how to do it better, and really want to learn from you, like what really was the trigger for you to, I guess, change your personality to be in this like bad bitch energy.
Yeah. I mean, it's, in some ways I think of it as an evolution, which is that I've always had big goals and I've always believed that I was meant to make a big impact. And I realized at a certain point that I can't do that if I don't speak to people, right? I mean, some people do it through performance, right? That's what athletes do. That's what theater and other types of performers do. But I'm not a very good singer. And I didn't grow up musically. I think I'm a pretty good dancer, but I have always been a great thinker. I think very deeply about things. I analyze myself to no end, probably to a detriment sometimes, but I found that I was always very also good at giving advice to my friends. I was just like a natural coach. I really enjoyed that. And I thought to myself, how do I bring that to a larger scale? And another skill I realized I had to learn was sales. Sales is also basically the art of persuasion and empathetic communication. And pitching, when I was fundraising, you have to learn how to speak on stage and pitch to investors and sound confident in your financial projections. And all of that just requires your voice. It requires you able to use your voice as a tool. And that's what I started seeing it as. My voice is a tool for change. My voice is a tool for impact. If I don't sell the things that I need to share with people, then they're not going to get that impact. They're not going to get the outcome that they want either. And so I really started thinking about how the own insecurity that I had around speaking really came down to, I didn't think my ideas were good enough. I didn't think I was perfect enough. I didn't think that my belief in myself was enough. Because really, when you are afraid to speak, it means that you are still in some subconscious part of yourself valuing what the other person thinks of what you have to say versus actually focusing on you believing what you have to say. And so today, speak on stages with thousands of people. And one of my friends asked me recently, she's transitioning in her career. She's like, so you're doing another speaking gig. Do you ever get nervous? Do you prepare? And I was like, I don't really prepare anymore. You asked me to speak. I'm just on stage and I just start saying things. One, because I know what my message is. Mm-hmm. I know what my mission is. I have spent 2.5 years talking about, writing about good girl brainwashing. And I spent my whole life trying to figure out what's the key to confidence. Mm-hmm. And I realized that there really wasn't a key. It was just a practice of learning how to stop caring about what other people think about you.
Mm. That's very true. I've been told from friends of mine that I exude confidence. I feel like I am so insecure and scared of talking in general, but apparently to others, I have this different, I guess, view to them that I'm just more of a bad bitch to them than I am to myself. And I'm trying to work on how to find that for myself. Mm. Yeah. So as a Forbes 30 under 30 honoree and a Fast Company executive board member, what have been the highlights and challenges of your career in entrepreneurship and coaching?
Wow. There have been a lot of highlights and there's also been a lot of lowlights in coaching. I would say, definitely seeing so many women actually successfully raise money after going through my pitching coaching, being able to build their dreams. That's why I do the coaching in the first place. I worked with my first male client recently, and that was really powerful experience. He was the CEO of $1 billion company. And I think that's when I really started seeing, I have not yet run $1 billion company, but there was something about what I was able to do that he saw value in. And I think that there's something about, especially for men in certain positions that have the openness and the awareness and want to become better leaders, they realize that they need to get trained by a woman, right? They need to bring in certain parts of themselves that another man simply could not teach them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there are more and more conscious leaders of all genders, and I'm excited to create that ripple effect through whoever it is that I'm working with. And and I think also just all the programs that I've launched. I've launched everything from a self-love boot camp to an investor boot camp to a business boot camp to a fundraising boot camp. And now I think going into this next stage, it's really about figuring out how to serve all the people that I want to serve. And of course, just releasing the Bad Bitch Business Bible was one of the big highlights. It definitely a dream come true.
Mm-hmm. Love that. I wish I had read your book earlier when I first started it wasn't out before, but I wish it was out before when I first started being an entrepreneur, because when I was going through going from corporate to entrepreneurship, I read a lot of books, but it was mostly books from men. And mm-hmm. I wish I had one from someone who was like me, who could understand it and guide me through it better, because when men write about it, it can sound a little pretentious and not as, for me, in my opinion, I should say, not as inviting. Whereas hearing it from you and hearing your experiences really was, I think, more inspiring, because it was seeing me in you, and that was great.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes a lot of people are surprised, especially if they hear me speak now, that the book is it's very vulnerable, right? It's very raw. It's here are my good girl mistakes. And I think that what you often see with business books by men is that they act like they know everything. They've got all their shit together and they're like, let me tell you from the voice of God that this is how it's done. Yeah. And I think that part of what needs to be broken down in this very toxically masculine narrative of success and leadership and power is that is not the reality. And that the majority of the time, as we know as entrepreneurs, you're actually no idea what you're doing. You're very confused. There's no correct playbook because there's a million different options of niches you could serve, business models you could have to raise money, to not to raise money, to incorporate as a C Corp, a B Corp, an S Corp, an LLC. Who do you hire onto your team? What's your team culture? There's like literally infinite ways to build a business, and a lot of times we can get completely wrapped up in indecision, fear of making the wrong decision, and fear of bringing on the wrong people onto our team. I wrote in my book about my toxic business partnership, and how that nearly ruined me in different ways. And I think that being very more and more open and vulnerable about like what it's like to actually do this, when there's also just, you don't know what the end is like, right? And no one's going to tell you what it's like. And I think part of the motivation these days is just like, keep going. It's okay. We all have the ups and downs.
Definitely. Reading about your toxic partnership was really tough to read. Like, it was written really well, that I could feel your emotions and how much you were going through. And I was just like feeling so much for you. So your Bad Bitch Empire aims to invest in impact-driven, female-led businesses. What qualities or ideas are you looking for in these ventures?
So I am looking for companies that are leveraging technology, especially frontier innovative technologies, to create exponential impact for women and the world. And so there are three core areas that I care a lot about. One is women's healthcare. Two is women's education and future of work. And then three is economic empowerment. So economic equality. And so I don't look as much into D2C startups, so direct to consumer product startups, but unless it's like Internet of Things, IoT. But what I really am looking for is someone with a really big mission, a clear business model, confidence that they can build a multi-million or billion-dollar company, and who has that audacity to dream big. And so some things that have been red flags, for example, having been on the entrepreneur side and now moving over to the investor side, I really understand the difference now, because I meet so many entrepreneurs where they have a great mission, they want to make so much impact, they're so passionate, they want to serve people. And then when the investor rejects them, they're like, I don't understand, they don't care about equality or women or whatever. And now that I'm sitting on the investor side of the table, it really is a totally different set of questions. It's like, how do you make money? How do I make my money back? How big is your market? What's your business model? What's your cost of customer acquisition? How are you going to grow? And it really is like, it's not that it doesn't matter how much passion you have, but that passion needs to be paired with sound logic, numbers, business growth. And I think as women, we have this natural passion to want to serve. And what the next iteration of us, if we want to really build those big companies, is starting to put our business hat on and saying, okay, that person, if that investor doesn't invest, they're not rejecting us. What is it showing in terms of me? What questions are they asking me usually about the numbers or the projections or the actual business of what I'm building?
Pitching in front of anyone, I think, is really hard. I've done it many times, but doing it to an investor, I feel like that is the hardest ever. And I'm constantly being told that it's all about storytelling. Like, telling the story is, I guess, really crucial to getting the point across really well. But I've also heard from the other side, I've heard from male investors that they always want to hear about the numbers and, again, like how to grow and all that. But I've learned from other female investors, they tell me it's more about storytelling. So it's really, really weird to hear that it's like two different kinds of techniques that are expected from male versus female investors.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal is obviously it's both, right? What's the narrative that you're painting? And then also it's like the narrative of the past. How did that get you to where you are now in the present? And then what's your vision for the future? And I think the biggest thing that is important is the momentum and the traction. Because if you think about it, it's like take a really hot new fall fashion line that's dropping from your favorite designer, right? And they put it into the store and they're like, okay, limited edition, there's only 100 pieces. We did this special collab with this designer, and people you see on social, people rushing to get the items, right? It's just like flying off the shelves, and you're going to be like, oh my god, I have to go and get that. Now imagine that you've had this, like, the same 100 pieces sitting there for 6 months, and like you're going to be like, why is no one buying it? What's wrong with it?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the psychology that investors have. And so I think part of what men tend to do really well, even if they are manipulative when they are doing it, is that they find a way to create FOMO. Right. They have the confidence of a mediocre white man, and that's what they do. And so, but it is tapping into a deeper human psychology, right? It's the same way we purchase things when there's limited edition sales, when there's like limited edition drops. And that's the way, when you think of, you are in the business of sales, right? Every business is in the business of sales. So how do you create that energy, that buzz around it, to be like, okay, if you buy now, this is the opportunity to get in. If you get into the fundraise now, it's the opportunity to do it. And then that really just becomes a game of, like, a quantity game. Because women will ask, well, how do I create that momentum? And then I ask them, well, how many investors have you emailed and how many investors have you pitched? And they're like, oh, I did one this week and I did one last week. And I'm like, how do you expect to create momentum? You need to be having like 20 calls a week. So you can be like, yes, I talked to this person, this person, this person, this person. That, by the way, I don't know if there are any single ladies out there, I'm sure there are, is the same way I talk about your dating roster, right? It's got to, like, just keep going. If you are serious about building your confidence in dating, it's like, it really is the reps. And, you know, the guys, the insecure guys will be like hating that comment, right? which by the way, I had a toxic ex that a relationship that I went through while writing the Bad Bitch Business Bible. So this is another thing that, like, that you people didn't see. Like, I had to be so strong on the outside, and I was going through some like hell behind the scenes, and I was like living this double life too. But the the part of like what I had learned was, when, especially if we are empathetic, if you like put all your hopes and dreams into one person, you've got the blinders on, and they are the wrong person, whether that's like a toxic investor, a toxic business partner, a toxic relationship, and you haven't like looked at all the different options available to you to see like what brings out the best in you, then you are more easily prone to falling into something that will take advantage of you, that will take advantage of your kindness and your empathy and your, your desire to make the world and help people and be better. So I just think that another thing that Good Girl Brainwashing has like really made a consequence for women is that it makes us afraid of rejection. And it feels like when we get rejected, like the whole world ends. And if you are fundraising for your company, you really need to detach the rejection from your sense of self-worth. And this is why I actually think, I love practicing on dating, because I think it's like you're dealing with the same psychology of, attraction, rejection, and fit. Even though it's different, right? One, you're pitching, well, in some ways you're pitching yourself, but it's just for different outcomes. And you start to realize, the more you do it, you're like, oh, it's the same thing with investors and money as it is with dating and relationships. If it's not this man, it's another man. Like, it's just there's so many, just like next one, like, you don't get it. I was on a call yesterday with 35 male investors for the Bad Bitch Empire Fund, and we all were doing our pitches, and then when I came on, I'm like, Bad Bitch Empire, we invest in frontier technology, creating exponential impact for women in the world, blah blah. And one man was like, I think our investors would be offended by your name and wouldn't invest. And I've gotten that a few times. And he's like, what do you have to say about that? And I was like, honestly, you love it or you hate it. If you feel uncomfortable, you feel offended, then just don't.
Yeah.
Bye. And then I got it immediately and an email from another guy who was like, I loved your presentation, your presence, whatever. And I was just like, the kings who get it. And I don't have the time to even deal with you because you don't even deserve to be on my cap table if you are so
Yes.
easily offended by bad bitch.
I love that so much. I had to pitch to an investor. Well, I pitched like a bunch of them last year when I was in this program, and this one male investor was such an asshole. I'm going to say he's an asshole, but mostly because I was the only one on my entire group that was a black female, is a black female. Everyone else was like white men, and then like two other ladies who were not black, not POCs. And this guy, he had a problem with me in the way that I spoke because of, I guess, my stuttering. And he was just like, he made so many comments about, like, he wouldn't even hear me pitch because of that. And he would put comments on it in my feedback sheet to be like, oh, Courtlyn can't speak. She can't be an entrepreneur because she can't speak. And all of these like mean things. And I'm like, you didn't give me anything that was like about my company. You just talked about only my speaking and my speech and just like use that to kind of tear me down to a point where when I had to pitch in person to him and to the other investors in the group, he got up and like left the room during my presentation. I'm like, just don't come. Like, why even come at all? Just go away. Like,
Yeah.
what was the point of that? So anyway, so fear, I'm on a tangent now, but fear of failure and worrying about others' opinions can be barriers. How can women overcome these obstacles and embrace their authentic selves?
I feel like we've been kind of talking about that the whole time, right? It's really just, I think there's this trend on Instagram that's like perfectly embodies this. It's like, how do you do it? Like you have to be delusional, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I have never used the term delusional, but I have used create your own reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you, regardless, we're all living in our own reality. We all have our own perspective of things. As you said, that man has his perspective, you have your perspective, I have my perspective, the guy who's offended by bad bitch has his perspective. And it doesn't make anyone's perspective wrong or right. It just makes them incompatible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right now, the patriarchal status quo of our world that is male dominated, so statistically speaking, as no one can argue with, 90% of senior leadership, CEO roles, investors, and senior partners are all men still. And women are still less than 10% across the board of almost every major industry that makes money. And the point is, it's like, there are some things we can control and there are some things that we cannot control. And what we can control is how we show up every day, how we, what we choose to believe in. Are we going to choose to believe in ourselves, or are we going to choose to believe in that other person's critical opinion of us? Are we going to choose to have our thoughts hinder on criticizing ourselves and looking for all the ways we're imperfect, or are we going to choose to believe that we are beautiful and special and have superpowers to change the world? Are we going to choose to be paranoid and pessimistic, or are we going to choose to be optimistic and hopeful? All of these are choices that we may think we don't have control of, but a lot of them is just like ingrained patterns of thought. And I think a lot of us still have ingrained patterns of victimhood, where we are keeping ourselves in perpetual victimhood. And this is actually something that I am, in my book, I talk about radical self-responsibility, right? The radical self-responsibility pledge says, I take charge and I know I'm in control of my thoughts, my feelings, my actions. Under no circumstances am I going to blame external circumstances, other people, the weather, whatever. But claiming responsibility for how you show up in the world and saying, I may not be able to control what other people do to me, but I can control how I respond, or maybe choose not to respond at all. But yeah, like I'm not yet immune to not being emotionally reactive about certain things, right? I do get triggered still, but every time I do, I look back at it and I'm like, was that really the bad bitch version of me? Or was that the, good girl reactive version of me? And yeah, it's still hard to even like, I'll even be totally honest, like with my toxic ex relationship, I still have those moments now where I'm like, I think back to how I allowed him to cross so many of my boundaries, right? I allowed so much bad behavior, and I would shame myself and be like, why didn't I leave sooner? Why didn't I see this sooner? Why was I so weak? And I have to still actively take myself out of those thoughts and be like, the past will not control me, right? The past does not dictate how I feel in the future. And one thing that I think for a lot of women who are feminist, who really care about women's empowerment and gender equality, I'm working through this myself right now, is to not default make men the enemy. And it's hard, right? There's a lot of nuance in this, because I'm like in the process of thinking through all this too, because it's like, we know not all men, okay? Like we don't need to have that disclaimer on every single thing that we say. But it is a lot of men, right? A lot of especially powerful, rich, white, privileged, old wealth men who are perpetuating certain systems of prejudice and sexism that are keeping certain people out. And so how to talk about that without going into a whole ass rabbit hole for an hour without ever going into, okay, so what do we do about it? Because I think that one piece of rhetoric that gets dangerous is that when we just sit there complaining, right? And complaining is victimhood. We're like, these men do this, these men do that. And I think it's good to rant to like other ladies who get it. And then it's like, all right, that's done. Now, how do we go secure the bag? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna do this together? How do we make more money? And I think that that's really then what I am shifting into next, because I started the Bad Bitch Empire on building unapologetic worth and wealth. As I have been growing in my own levels of worth, first and foremost. Well, both, but really when I got to the worth aspect and I was like, okay, I think I get it. I feel worthy. I've been so busy working on my worth, but I am not close to the level of wealth that I want. Like I see, because there's a wealth that women get told we can have. And then you look at the wealthy men when they say things like, oh yeah, the small fund that I was thinking about being a partner in, that it was only 100 million. And you're like, wow, I thought wealth was like, I don't know, 5-10 million. Okay. I need to expand my wealth container, right? Like my levels of wealth, like my perspective just shifted. And this is why I think it's also really important to be around men, because men have had a very different type of training around wealth. So now in this next level, I'm really starting to think about like, okay, one of the consequences of good girl brainwashing, of course, is the self-worth, and then what? Okay, let's talk about imposter syndrome. Great. Okay, now you broke free of it. Then what? Then it always gets to, well, I can't make money. I can't raise money. And then what happens when you then can't raise money or make money, you spiral back into the low self-worth. And so I see a lot of teachers these days that are like manifestation and like wealth energetics and law of attraction. And I believe, again, in creating your own reality and taking action towards that, which I honestly think is what manifestation is. It's like change your energy, be open to receiving, like concentrate on it, make moves. But I think that being able to talk unapologetically about money and saying like, I want to be rich, and I want to spend this money on, a $50,000 wardrobe revamp. And that is not selfish. That is not greedy. That is perfectly aligned with what a woman who wants to change the world should be wearing, if it makes her feel good.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
So I spoke earlier about how my favorite ones in your book were Commandment 5 and 6. And I'm curious to know for you, like, what is your favorite ones, or if there's more than one from your book?
Man, my favorite one. This book took me 2.5 years to write, and I am like, there's a point at which I was like, I can't read my own words anymore. I've read these so much, and I had to take a break from my own book. I mean, I would definitely say the hardest ones to write were the bank account section, because I was in my own. It was hard for me because I had done so much work again on the worth side of things, and then when I had to then come face to face with my own feelings of financial inadequacy when I was writing it, I was like, wow, like this is hard to break through. And I think that I also was going through my own, I was making my first investments during that time, right? And I'm like, I don't know if this is going to turn out. I don't know if this is going to work out well. Is this going to make me really rich? I don't know. And I think that was like this ongoing thing. And again, now we know investing is a 5-10 year journey. There is no overnight success there. But I mean, my favorite, I'm looking at the book now. I love my introduction. I really love my introduction. I love reading it because it's setting the groundwork for breaking free of good girl brainwashing, what it means to be a bad bitch. And then I really liked it's interesting. No one's actually asked me what my favorite chapter was. And I'm like, I don't actually know. Because my experience of it was like, how hard was it to write each chapter? Like how much, how difficult was it? I mean, what I can say is that I really like the self-love exercises. So like the body, like the body section, everything from learning how to love your voice to learning how to love the woman in the mirror. Those are still things that I think back to when I do this self-love, like bad bitch body challenges, have some of the most transformative results for women, because it's a very holistic, like come face to face with your relationship to yourself. And everything's exposed when you're naked in front of the mirror by yourself, and you have to then write your love letter to yourself, and you're like, wow, I've been really mean to me.
Yeah, I did that in the book. I was like, this is really hard. I'm crying reading your book and writing these out.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so bonus question. When was the last time that you felt fearless? A time when you felt the fear, but you did it anyway. And then how did it turn out?
Felt the fear. I feel like it's like a daily basis.
I can do that. Yeah.
It's every newsletter I send out right before I hit send to the thousands of people, there's fear.
Yeah.
Even sometimes posting on social media, there's still fear, right? They're still like, oh, what if this is a dumb message? What else? Oh, I mean, launching the Bad Bitch Empire Fund. A lot of overcoming imposter syndrome of, can I call myself a venture capitalist when these men have $100-250 million funds and I just have my little fund? And what does a successful fund mean? And I was so hard on myself because I was comparing myself to those multi-hundred-million-dollar funds that men were running. And I was listening to these podcasts by men who were like, yeah, it was so easy. I mean, it was just like it was 125 mil, like it's just pretty small, but we're just getting started. And I'm like, I don't even feel like starting. I feel like this is so embarrassing for me to start out with like, like, and I think that is where this comparison of like, don't compare your beginning with someone else's middle or advanced part of their career, or, certain men who have significant advantages. And also when I realized that, okay, well, of the $110 trillion of assets under management, women fund managers are 1%. And it's even less than the 2% of female founders getting funded.
Yep.
Right. And I'm like, well, that's because it's really effing hard to like not even launch a company, but to launch a fund, and to do so where in a place where the majority of LPs are men who are funding funds. It's like the same cycle. And to realize that like men don't get the same questions. Men get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And I can't be that hard on myself because I'm at least trying something that 99% of people don't even try.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it because it was easy.
I love that answer. What is the most valuable piece of advice that you would give to anyone who is at the beginning of their entrepreneurial or self-discovery journey?
I mean, I always say the quote in my book, which was, a woman steps into her full power, not when she is finally given permission to do so, but when she realizes she never needed permission in the first place. And the reality is that no one is going to give you permission to go after your dreams. No one is going to give you permission to dream bigger, to launch your next program, to launch your next product, to fundraise, to do whatever it is that you want to do, because they're not in it for you. and I think that this is just something that you learn, which is that everyone has their own agenda in business. And minus perhaps your mom and dad who love you, or your family, or whoever your chosen family is, but your customers, your clients, they want something from you. They want the transformation, they want the service. Your listeners want the motivation, the inspiration. The investors, they want a return. People are in it for themselves. And I think the sooner that you get comfortable with that understanding, and it's like, oh, it's not because they're selfish or they're mean. It's just that that's being human. Like from a biological standpoint, we all individually want to survive and thrive and protect our families and ourselves. And business is just a 21st century modern capitalist version of human evolution. And people are like survival of the fittest. And that's, yeah, I think that's just how our species has evolved. And so I think that if you want to be a winner, you have to take certain risks and you have to go for it. And every time you're knocked down, just get back up and not wait for someone else to say, okay, you have permission to do so. It's just knock on doors and knock them down.
Love that. An awesome way to end the show. So lastly, how can our audience find you?
Follow me on Instagram at Lisa Carmen Wang. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn at Lisa Carmen Wang, and then go to badbitchempire.com, get on the newsletter, check out the podcast, check out our boot camps, and a lot of other exciting programs that I'll be launching. Oh, and don't forget to get the Bad Bitch Business Bible.
Yes, buy
Every
it. Okay. Thank you for joining me today, Lisa. You have been so inspirational. I am sweating from talking to you because all of this nerves in me, just all in my sweater, but you have been great. And I really appreciate you having the time today to talk to me.
Thank you.
And that is a wrap. Fearless Narratives airs every Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday. Thank you for joining us today. You have been an amazing audience and we really love your support. So we also would love for you to give us a nice 5-star review. And until next time, stay fearless.